delighted to be here with you today. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time.
Me too.
Welcome.
Thank you.
What brought you to Los Angeles?
What brought me to Los Angeles? Well, Brandi Carlile singing Joni Mitchell Blue.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's as good a reason as any,
and
right?
you. But
how was it? Did it live up to the hype?
It lived up to the hype. Actually, there were parts of it that lived up to the hype in unexpected ways. Brandi Carlile was so nervous to perform Blue in front of her idol. You know, Joni Mitchell was there.
Right.
Sir Elton John was there. I had seats behind. You know, I didn't have the best seats, but I was close. But I had a perfect view of all the people, all the famous people sitting in the front couple rows who got to see this performance. So it was just a trip to see Brandi's body language from behind most of the time. But she was very open about her tension about it. She's like, I am really nervous about this, you know. But yeah, Joni Mitchell's a living legend. I mean, the way Brandi described her, I think is true. It's like living in the time of Beethoven or Rembrandt, but in music. And we live at the same time as Joni Mitchell, and probably not for much longer. So
you have a deep Joni Mitchell fandom streak.
I do.
Goes back.
I mean, her album Blue. She's spectacular, and my whole family loves Joni Mitchell. And my dad is the one that introduced me to Joni, and he introduced Jesse to Joni when Jesse and I first started dating. We were on this camp trip, and Jesse was super nervous. And my dad essentially told Jesse he should start getting into Joni Mitchell because the ladies like it. Like he was giving him tips. He said it in a much more crude way than that, but essentially,
so he actually had to become a fan, right?
Yeah, he did. He has a nice respect for Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, and that you got on an airplane to come and see that.
I did, yeah. Birthday/Mother's Day present for my mom. Went to a fancy restaurant, and we just had a really kind of out of the ordinary experience for us.
Right.
So it was very special.
That's cool. And you grew up around here.
I did.
Yeah.
Santa Clarita. And I was just noting on the drive up here how this area is where I used to go with my dad when he would take me to work, wake me up at 4:30, go down to the sets of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman at Paramount Ranch, and my sister and I would play around in whatever like Western buildings weren't being used that day for filming, and imagine that we were prairie people.
Yeah. He was a prop master, right? Does he still do that?
No, he passed 4 years ago,
he did.
but he was 30-something years. I mean, he got started building sets for concerts of all the kind of great bands of the 60s and 70s in his late teen years.
Right.
And then he went in the Army for a few years, went to Germany, came back, and then he started working for Hollywood in the union, building sets.
Right. Paramount Ranch is super cool, but it's gone now, basically. Completely burned in the fire. People who are listening might recognize it from Westworld. All the kind of
did
old
Westworld
Western,
there?
the Western town stuff was all done. And that white church is from Westworld as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I think the church is still there, but everything else is gone, and they haven't rebuilt it yet.
Wow. What a trip. Yeah, it's just one of those moments when I'm driving with my mom and she tells me that you're having this nice little memory about a place that was important to you as a kid. And then it's like, oh, by the way, it burned down. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. All right.
But
moving on.
Everything's burning down around here.
Yeah.
We just had a big fire this past weekend.
Yeah.
And I want to track like your whole personal story because it's super interesting. But there's so much going on in running and track and field right now.
God.
It's insane. Like I can't even keep up with all the crazy news.
I know.
And as somebody who's, yes, you're retired, but you're very much an insider and you've been outspoken and have lots of opinions on all of these things. So I'm kind of excited to hear your take on all the goings on.
Well, great. I better take a few sips of coffee. Let's do this.
I mean, we can start with Kipchoge's 159. I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, this is just this past weekend.
Yeah, I didn't live stream it. I don't even remember what I was doing. I think work event stuff, but certainly followed it. And I mean, it's amazing. It was amazing to see it done.
Yeah.
Even in the context of, performance enhancing shoe technology that maybe shouldn't be legal for performance, or I don't know, all the pacing and stuff. It's still magical to see somebody going for it. And Kipchoge's such a lovable character. Like
he seems like such a beautiful guy.
He is, and he really feels deeply, and has a way of expressing himself that it feels pure to me. And I think without Kipchoge being the hero of that story, I don't think it would work. I don't think it would hold much interest.
Yeah, I think it was Lindsay Krause who tweeted something like, the best part was seeing him accelerate across the finish line and then speed up to hug his wife.
Yes.
You know?
That finish line clip was the only clip I really saw.
Yeah, me too.
And it was so cool. I mean, just bliss on his face, And it's also it shows you how much adrenaline you experience by how little effort he looked like he was feeling at the end. I mean, who knows?
I mean, he looked fresh as a daisy.
He looked fresh as a daisy.
And I think it's, kind of canvassing the internet reaction to this whole thing has been interesting. Like, I think that you can appreciate kind of the beauty and orchestration that went into doing something that had never been done before, while also understanding that there's artifice involved and there's these crazy shoes. We don't even know what's inside this shoe, and all the pacing and all the machinations that went into making it possible. Like, we can entertain both of those ideas.
I mean, it's a magic show. It just reminds me of the big public displays of the famous musicians and making the Statue of Liberty disappear, or any of these things, the think tanks in the middle of plazas, they're all orchestrated for entertainment. If you know what you're getting into, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see how long it takes before we see 159 in a real race. Like, I would imagine that the impact of that display will accelerate that happening because it changes people's perspective and belief about what's possible.
Absolutely. I mean, you see that across all industries. You have to see it to be it. And unless you're Kipchoge, you just be it.
I guess,
But for most of us, it helps to see it done. And, there are the valid criticisms too. One of the things that sits with me as a woman is there's so often this kind of really important milestone that starts with men, the sub-2 marathon, the sub-4 mile. And the beginning of rallying around these barriers is always on the men's side. And then we sort of search for the female equivalent kind of after the fact and like, oh, equality.
Right.
What could we do here that is equally exciting or transcendent culturally to get people pumped on the women's side? And so it's always a little bit tough on that, just thinking about that. And I don't want to, use it to take away from what Kipchoge did, because absolutely it's amazing. But it is enlightening to just see that when you have the biggest sports brand in the world deciding where they're going to put their marketing dollars, it's mostly men in those rooms, and they're mostly interested in the men's performances. And so that the ideas that naturally spring up are around men's barriers. And that's just another example of that. So there's just another reason to get more women in more of those rooms.
Yeah. Well, we did see the eclipsing of Paula Radcliffe's record this weekend as well.
Yeah,
in
Bridget
Chicago.
Kosgei.
Also on a crazy, mysterious shoe.
Yes,
right?
She is.
But nonetheless, a world record performance.
Yeah, that one's hard for me to get excited about. I think, she works with an agent who's been associated with so many marathoners that have tested positive for drugs. And, it's just like the unfortunate thing is this association. If you associate yourself with these people who have so many ties to drugs and doping, and it's really difficult to appreciate it, fully. It's hard to suspend belief.
which brings us to the next big, event in running, which is the Salazar, doping scandal.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know until I started digging into you a little bit deeper over the past couple of days was your own little kind of semi-brush with Salazar back in, when was that, like 2015 or something like that?
2005 maybe.
Oh, 2005, right. I read David Epstein's ProPublica piece on that at the time. So can you explain what happened there? I mean, I know it's ancient history, but it seems really kind of fresh and relevant. Yeah,
definitely. I think it's interesting because with all the conversations around whistleblowers, I don't know if I classify. I don't think I do, but it's just one of those, I don't really know where my story fits in it.
I mean, it was a little bit of an alarm bell sounding, I think.
Yeah.
It was a harbinger of what was to come.
Yeah, and I knew that there was an investigation underway. I knew they were obviously digging around in Alberto's methods. And I've been thinking a lot about that time, because when that interview with ProPublica started resurfacing when the Alberto Salazar thing came out and I started seeing my name back in, I was feeling nauseous because doing that interview was really challenging. It was a tough decision for me to do, not because I feel that I cheated or deserve or was at risk of, I don't know. It's hard to explain why it was. I guess it was just admitting to the mindset of an athlete trying to be the best and how you are then vulnerable to the adults in your life and their input on what it's going to take to be the best. And that I took a small step in the direction and probably would have taken many more if I had been in Nike Oregon Project. I mean, I was like one of the most promising athletes in history coming out of Stanford in my event. And, you know, a lot of people thought I had the complete package to help put distance running back on the map. I mean, it's on the map now, but it wasn't when I was coming out of college. We had Dina Castor's medal in marathon and MEBS. But outside of those two little moments, we'd had nothing for so long. And that was my whole goal, was to do that. And so I came out of Stanford and there was this sort of emerging, philosophy that was in reaction to all the blood doping. So every movement is sort of a reaction to something else. So blood doping was becoming this big thing, and people were reading about it. And then the flip side of that was, how can we beat the cheaters without crossing the line? Like, how can we outsmart the cheaters using all the legal tools at our disposal? And this is the era of Paula Radcliffe. This is the era of Alberto Salazar founding Nike Oregon Project. And I really think that the intentions at the time were, I mean, he said it straight up in interviews before, were to use every single method on this side of legal to be competitive with the rest of the world and to put us on the top of the stage. And that wasn't controversial at the time. That was kind of like good idea. Way to use what we've got, which is science and technology and smarts, right? And now when we look at it with this 15-year lens, looking back, all this concept of marginal gains and going into gray areas is very much in line with cheating. We're like, the intent was to get an unfair advantage, therefore, it was against the spirit of the sport. And essentially, that's where we are now. And that's where I sit now with how I feel about it. I really feel that you shouldn't do any of those things. But at the time I don't think it was very clear. And so I remember being in that position of, should I sleep in an altitude tent? I do have asthma and have a prescription for an inhaler. Should I take the strongest dose possible to me year round, even if I only need it seasonally? Like these kind of questions of like, where is the line and where should it be? And
it does get gray and murky. I mean, there's on the one hand, there's things like cryotherapy and warm-up techniques. And I think, sleeping in an altitude tent is kind of a standard practice for a lot of people. Like, I don't think people look at that as being super controversial. But that seems qualitatively different than, hey, you have a little bit of asthma, but let's trump it up and try to get the massive dose and use it year round, as opposed to just when your symptoms flare up.
Exactly. And so in seeking guidance for my asthma, Alberto was the person who knew a doctor in Portland who had experience testing athletes. And I believe this doctor was a good doctor. I don't think the doctor has been, it's not like the Dr. Brown case with thyroid. This asthma doctor has not been implicated in anything, and all those medications are now legal anyway. But at the time they were on the restricted list. You had to have a therapeutic use exemption for certain kinds of inhalers. And it was just if you went to your neighborhood allergist, they would just have you breathe in a tube and go, you don't have asthma. But you're like, no, really though, I do when I run in cold weather or the 5K, but they couldn't simulate those conditions. And so you couldn't test appropriately an exercise-induced asthma just anywhere. So anyway, that was kind of how I ended up getting connected with Alberto. I was a top Nike athlete. I lived in Oregon. Or not, where did I live at the time? Maybe I lived in California at the time. Anyway, I was going to be living in Oregon. But I had obviously connections to Nike headquarters, and he was starting this thing out there. And it was like, I was like one step removed. So I had access to some of it if I wanted it. But then I had Vin Lanana as my coach, who really protected me. I mean, he when I look back, I'm so glad I was under his guidance at the time, because I know altitude tents are legal, but it's what an altitude tent led to at that time. So if you were sleeping in an altitude tent all the time and you were trying to maintain this crazy level of training, it was really common to get run down because you weren't sleeping as well.
Yeah,
you were in
don't
an
sleep
altitude
well.
tent.
Right.
Well, once you get run down, now suddenly you can go to the doctor that tests thyroid and show that your thyroid is suppressed, right? Because suddenly all your other values are getting negatively impacted. So I always kind of started to, or I don't always, I now see the altitude tent through Nike Oregon Project as a kind of a gateway,
yeah.
to other things. And it facilitated my exhaustion really quickly.
Yeah.
And it led to a conversation with Vin Lanana about thyroid, because I'd heard about other athletes and Galen Rupp and whoever having this thyroid problem. And I was like, maybe I have a thyroid problem. He's like, maybe you do, but maybe, you're just tired because you're training really hard and you're not sleeping properly because you're sleeping in this tent, and maybe you need to take responsibility for what the limits of your body are. And I remember feeling really embarrassed, because I remember thinking, like, if I go to this doctor that these guys are seeing, I'll probably get whatever they're getting,
Right. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about this experience that you had is that, ultimately you had an ethical compunction that allowed you to say, like, this doesn't feel right to me. Like there's like what's legally okay. And then there's, our internal kind of barometer around ethics. And, that flared up for you and you were like, I'm stepping away from this. This doesn't feel right to me. But I think it speaks to how these things happen. Like we tend to, from our armchairs, cast aspersion and judgment on these athletes that make the wrong choice, but we don't appreciate the nuance of what leads up to it, because it is a very gradual, slow thing where it's one thing and then it's the next thing, and then before you know it, you've crossed that line, but that line seems imperceptible in the moment.
Yeah, and that's why in the end I decided to speak with David Epstein, because I felt that the conversations I was hearing around the topics of Dr. Brown and the thyroid stuff, or the tents, or Alberto's group, all this stuff I just felt like was turning so black and white. Like any athlete that could do anything is just evil, and and I was like, it's so much more complex. It is so much more complex, and I've always believed that telling personal narrative is kind of the better way to help people understand the complexity of something. And so I kind of offered myself out there, even though I knew it would result in some skewering. I ended up getting a call from an old competitor right when it came out who chewed me out, who was just like, she took it as you cheated and this and this. And like, I think she took it as I had all these other things I must not have admitted. Really, there was nothing else to the story. But I remember taking that call and just being like, okay, here we go. Like, why did I even bother telling that story? Is it going to be any good? But I do think that it helped contribute to a conversation that, a public conversation, a public understanding. It's just one of many stories that contributes to like the dialogue around this, the importance of really fighting for ethical and clean sport, of learning what is and isn't okay, and what we want that to look like in the future. The past is what it is, but I still do believe clean sport is possible. It's going to be hard, but it needs to be nuanced, our understanding of the past. And we rely a lot on whistleblowers too. So no one's going to come out and talk about their experiences if we have this black and white view on everything.
Right. And it's amazing that you shared what you shared way back in 2005. And here we are in 2019 when this is finally getting adjudicated. And in between we have Steve Magnus. When did Steve Magnus kind of come out and publicly talk about that L-carnitine thing that went down?
I think it was actually, the story I told was from 2005, but it was probably between 2015 and 17 that I did the interview.
Oh, when it got public, I see.
And then that was similar to Steve. So it was kind
Around
of
the same
around,
time.
we were all starting to tell our stories, because the rise of Nike Oregon Project and these performances that seemed unbelievable, and the stories that were kind of being circulated within distance running of what was going on there, plus some of our personal experiences. I heard some of the things about L-carnitine. I was like, that's not hard for me to believe, or that all these athletes are being tested for or being treated for thyroid conditions and the medication helps them lose weight before race season. I'm like, that's not hard to believe because of my experience with asthma and my conversations with Alberto. I felt like I understood the mindset. And so I was concerned that as the biggest sports brand, the most influential sports brand, putting their marketing dollars behind this group and these performances that had an ethos that was really dangerous to clean sport, that's not okay, you know?
Yeah. And it goes all the way to the top with
does.
the CEO being aware of the testosterone cream and all of that. And
Yeah.
the email from Salazar to Lance Armstrong, you know, there's a lot of stuff that, you know, people all the way to the top were privy to.
Yeah, they were. And it's one of those things around innovation too. I mean, I don't know if you have thought about it from that perspective, but I think that what Alberto wanted to do with NOP was some sort of parallel to what the innovation lab looks like for footwear, right? It was, let's innovate our approach to training and coaching just the way we would innovate the fastest spike. We'll look outside the box, we'll put a carbon plate in it, whatever you do. And I think, to me, that explains why there was so much conversation with Mark Parker, because it's, and to me, that doesn't
the line between technological innovation and other kind of, you know, less acceptable forms of moving the needle forward got kind of enmeshed.
Yeah,
right.
I think so.
I mean, it's not dissimilar from the, you know, the tech suits and swimming. Like, it's getting weird.
Yeah,
it's not just
weird.
steroids and EPO. Like, now we're entering into gene therapy and all kinds of craziness where it's going to become even, you know, it's going to become 100-fold more difficult to try to figure out what's fair and what's not.
Yeah. I'm surprised no one has invented shaving your head in swimming and then covering, like putting some sort of silicone directly onto your scalp. Like, why hasn't, that's going to be the next
Well, the caps
thing.
are kind of like that.
Yeah,
I guess.
but
we've been shaving
you
down.
could probably
Swimmers been
take a little
shaving
more
forever.
time off if it was
Probably.
directly adhered to your skin.
I know, right? Like, or, yeah, some kind of lotion for your skin, you know, something like that. I don't know.
I did want to bring up, though, before we get off the doping conversation or move it in a different direction, is that Nike, it is shocking to me, and I don't know what you think, that a company like Nike that spends so much time on branding initiatives that have to do with the purity of the sport, you know, that I know of, they have never taken a stand on doping. Like, they've never launched a brand campaign about clean sport and only using the body you've got. Am I wrong on that?
What do you make of that?
Well, it would be completely on brand for them if you're looking at their brand deck. Mm-hmm. But when you look at their marketing assets, you know, you've got the NFL, MLB, you know, they would put themselves in a position to look like the biggest hypocrites ever, because then they would have to take a stand.
Right. If something happens, then everyone's going to pull up that ad campaign.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's all of it's already happening. I mean, if you just look at if they really wanted to stand for clean sport, they could completely change everything in a year.
Wasn't that Lance Armstrong ad, you know, what am I on? I'm on my bike. That was a Nike ad.
That was a Nike ad, which is so ironic.
Yeah. So maybe, you know, you know, like reflecting back on that, it's like, maybe we shouldn't do that. Like, we're still talking about that ad.
That's true. But like for example, if they decided that a major brand value for them was going to be clean sport, they could influence stricter rules in Major League Baseball and the NFL around doping offenses rather than whatever they do, a couple game suspension or whatever it is. In some of these cases, they could influence everything. They can move mountains with the amount of money and marketing dollars and the level of assets, like top athletes in every sport. I just wonder, what could they do if they set their mind to it? Like, yeah, it would be awkward and uncomfortable at first.
Yeah. I mean, they could clean house. They could create like a Manhattan Project around it with the resources that they have. But, you know, clearly it's not part of their business plan.
No.
And I think that, you know, part of that is perhaps a function of the fact that the way we perceive doping in sports like track and field and swimming and cycling is very different from what it looks like in the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball. Like, it's almost like those sports get a pass. Like, we don't really, every once in a while there's the A-Rod kind of situation, but I can't imagine what's actually going on there that just gets, you know, unnoticed. Mm-hmm. So there is a disparity in the way that we think about doping in sports in those various disciplines.
There is. And they're the kind of I guess that's what I mean by they're sort of the common player in all of them. So if you were going to make
Right.
sweeping change culturally, I don't know who else could do it.
They certainly have the marketing muscle to be able to create impact in anything that they decide to focus on, you know, which kind of opens up a new discussion, right? Like about how the way that they've kind of decided to do that. And one of the other things that's been a big kind of deal in the running world in recent memory is the way that Nike has dealt with maternity leave with their pregnant female athletes. And it was a big story that, like, again, back to Lindsay Krause, like, she's like incredible. Like, she's just breaking all these stories. She's also an amazing runner.
Yeah, she's
getting ready for New York right now. Like, I just love reading everything that she does. And she broke this story, right?
Yeah.
And so this is another thing that you've had a few things to say about. So maybe like just explain this situation for people that are listening who are unfamiliar.
Yeah. Well, so with being a professional woman runner, you kind of view your motherhood plan or your parenting plan based on your job. I think that's probably true and well beyond sport, right? But the way contracts were set up, there was no mention of the word pregnancy specifically, but it was well known that pregnancy was treated as a injury. And I don't know about this across all brands, but I know that
first of all, that's great, right? Then, like, pregnancy as an injury,
Yeah.
like, we're just on the wrong path,
Totally,
from the get-go.
And generally, athletes would have some sort of a clause around if you don't compete within this many days. I mean, that could be as short as 8 weeks up to 6 months. If you don't compete within that number of days, then you could get a contract reduction of 50% or 35%, or you could be dropped. Or if you lose your world ranking or your national ranking, that could be written into your contract. If you lose that or it drops below a certain amount, you would lose significant amount of pay. So as a younger woman looking at my contract, it didn't look like babies fit in there anywhere. And most of the conversations that I'd have with my peers involved, if I want to have kids, it's going to be when I retire. Because, you know, you're going to have to move on. And so that's just always what I thought. I thought I'd race for about 8 years and then start a family, and that'd be it. And so it pushes you into such a non-creative space, and you lose all this great talent right when they're entering their prime. So what happened was Alicia Montano helped bring the story forward of what happened to her with Lindsay Krause in that story that broke with New York Times.
6-time Olympic
gold
I mean,
she's
goals?
getting
11-time world champion, 6-time medalist.
She's won 6 medals, but she's getting them all 10 years after the fact, right? From doping.
Right, back to the doping
That's kind of, those wrongs are being righted the best they can. So I think she just got a medal at Doha World Championships from 2011 or something. We went to the same high school. Alicia and I are really
you did? Wow.
dear friends. I was a bridesmaid in her wedding. I mean, we're tight. And so I couldn't think of a better face for that movement than Alicia and just what she went through. But yeah,
is she the one that tripped in the 800 meters?
Yeah, she was at the Olympic trials and had a big emotional display, understandably.
Right.
But yeah, that was horrible and heartbreaking. So that's kind of what happened. She did this beautiful video piece plus op-ed with Lindsay Krause about her experiences of essentially being let go, having her contracts threatened with ASICS even, and then really bringing to the forefront of people's attention, why should this be so? Especially in the wake of Nike having just produced this ad about women can do anything they can dream of, and featuring all these moms in the ads and all this stuff. So it wouldn't be such a big deal if they weren't. And
Serena, of course.
Yeah, and Serena, this huge story. And so they're marketing women mothers with this lie, essentially. Mother athletes doing these incredible things with the support of Nike and these very dramatic, tear-jerking videos. And then here's the reality of what they do to their female athletes behind closed doors with their contracts, with their pay. Kara Goucher's story was very compelling because she was suspended. They didn't pay her for a year when she was pregnant with Colt. But they required her to do all of these appearances. I can't remember the number, if it was like 11 or 16 appearances. She was on the cover of Runner's World. She actually became more famous than ever that year. She wasn't getting paid at all, but she was working for them, and she was not allowed to seek payment from anyone else, any competitor.
Right, because of exclusivity.
Yeah. So like, I don't even think that's legal, that you could basically
prevent somebody
force someone
from
to
earning.
work for free. I've heard of this before.
Right. Well, there's so many interesting facets to this. I mean, when I first kind of casually came across the story, my first instinct was, well, this must be antiquated boilerplate language that was inserted in these contracts forever ago, and nobody bothered to really kind of update it. But I was resistant or reluctant to like infer malevolence. Like I just thought, well, this is just, this is outdated and they're just late to fixing this. But it sounds like there's been women trying to challenge this all along, and it's not just Nike. I mean, Nike's at the forefront of this, but there are other brands that are doing this as well, and they've been like, no, this is the line that we're drawing in the sand, and I think it speaks to a bigger issue, which you have, like, you're an interesting figure in this, in what I want to say, which is this whole industry is built upon this paradigm of athletic performance. Like your value is directly wed to podiums, appearances, what races are you going to be on, and what podiums are you going to stand atop. We're in a very different world now, and you're like the first generation of people and a leading voice in this movement, which is that these things need not be so directly coupled. Like you have a voice and a point of view and a fan base, and legions of very loyal people that care very much what you have to say. In my opinion, that transcends whatever podium you're like. That's way more powerful for a brand than, oh, you're going to get a silver or a bronze at some meet in Doha or whatever that the general public doesn't even really care about.
Yeah.
But this is the legacy of that, right? And I feel like we're in this middle ground now where these brands haven't really cottoned on to the fact that the world has changed.
Absolutely. And I'm always uncomfortable with calling myself a pioneer in something, with this being one exception.
Because you started like OG blogger,
in 2009,
back in the day.
When we started having these tools available to us. I decided, because I was sort of disillusioned with my first 6 years as a professional athlete, I thought that if I just became a national champion, they would use me in marketing and advertising, and we could help. I could be a person that helped bring the sport to a greater audience, and I won a national championship, and nothing happened. I did a great job with interviews. It didn't matter. We couldn't seem to get anything outside of our little circle of running media, and I was like, well, when social media and blogging came to my attention, I'm like, you can write your own story. You don't have to wait around for non-endemic media to come knocking on your door and decide your story's worthwhile. You make your story worthwhile. You tell your own story, and the readers will find you. I mean, it was so empowering. And so I did. I started doing that in 2009. And so by the time 2012 came around, when my contract was going to be up with Nike, this was my second conversation with the CEO, Mark Parker. But in this one, I came into his office essentially to say, hey, I want to have a baby. This model that we have that you just described so well, Rich, is antiquated. Why are we still basing our contracts on this? I have been blogging. I have been using social media. I have an audience. I have a story that's much richer than, it's not dependent on being on the podium. But I'm trying to re-sign my contract with Nike, and they have devalued me at 20% of what I was paid before, but I'm more valuable than I've ever been. And this is crazy.
Right.
Like basically telling him that the person he had in charge of sports marketing contracts was totally outdated, and that there were going to be missed opportunities, especially with women, because at that moment I wanted to have a child and was thinking, this is actually a story that applies and is valuable to a lot of women. And you look at who's signing up for road races, 65% women.
Right. That's their customer base. That's their audience. Like what was Parker's response?
It was like pretty lukewarm. It was
shocking to me.
I know. And his wife was a world record holder in the 5K at one point.
I mean, what is the annual revenue of Nike?
I don't even know. It's
you know,
numbers that are silly.
It's numbers you can't even wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, just minute dollars to allocate towards this thing, where if they'd gotten out in front of it with the pregnancy stuff, or with people like yourself, like identifying like, hey, Lauren has a voice, like there's something really interesting going on here. Let's put a little marketing muscle and a few dollars behind this. And the amount of goodwill that they could engender with their customer base the ROI on that is insane. So it just seems completely myopic to me.
It is crazy. And I do think that there was an element of Mark Parker not wanting to step on the toes of somebody that is in charge of a department who's been there for 25 years or whatever, right? I'm sure that people don't want to get up in someone's business unless they really, really want to go to bat for something. Mm-hmm. Because I felt like the conversation when we were eyeball to eyeball in his office was one where he was hearing me, but I also didn't leave feeling like he was going to do anything about it. That was really discouraging. And it was the first time I went into Mark Parker's office was in 2006, right after I had won my U.S. championship. And I had tried to work with the global sports marketing director, trying to talk about why is the Nike women's catalog completely full of models, but you're using your top male athletes to model the clothes for your sportswear company. Why are models modeling the women's stuff and athletes modeling, and he was like, that's not my department. That's brand, whatever, essentially. Like, this isn't what I do. I sign athletes and they win medals. That's what I do. And so I ended up emailing Mark Parker at 2 a.m. by guessing his email address based on the formula of everyone's email address.
@Nike.com.
And he emailed me back. And it was Jesse who told me to do that, my husband, because he was so sick of watching me stew over it. He's like, just email him. I'm like, all right, I'll try. And he did reply. And in that particular instance, that first time I went into his office, I was so nervous. But I was heard and changes were made. And
there was a campaign emails and after that, right?
He got a hold of his head of brand and, things happened, things changed. And I felt it was probably the first time that I remember getting over the anxiety around using my voice, using it, and having something big happen. And so it was just so different from the second time when I came in there. There's everybody's got their line, and moms didn't make it. Motherhood didn't make it at that time. So I was really relieved when that story broke with Alicia and Lindsay Krause to see that if I couldn't be the person that made a difference, somebody else could make a difference.
Yeah. The video is incredible.
Yeah.
And she does that race while she's pregnant too in the video,
Yeah.
which is cool. And we should say like we focused a lot on Nike because, you were with Nike and Nike is obviously the biggest target, but this is like an industry issue.
You could tell it was industry-wide because in the wake of the ad, companies were coming out one after the other with revised language. Yeah. And Burton was one of the early ones. Noon, Oiselle, the reason I went to Oiselle, and they signed me pregnant. I don't know if that has ever happened, actually, if a brand signed a professional athlete while openly pregnant with them.
Yeah. And you're a partner in that company, right?
I am, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Well, I feel like things are changing, but they're not changing quickly enough.
That's always the case, right?
Right, I guess, right? We're in an era now where we're celebrating like the strength of women athletes in a way that we haven't before, and we are seeing this incredible resurgence in American distance running women, which is kind of cool and incredible. But there are so many things that still need fixing.
Yeah, there are. There are. And I, as a retired professional, athlete, I'm still really involved in the community. I try to keep myself engaged on mostly issues of gender equality, racial equality, ability, anything like that any progress that can be made. And I just try to make sure that I'm up to date the best that I can and helping kind of disseminate information to the audience the best I can.
Yeah, in a very honest and authentic way.
Yeah.
Like you're not afraid to share your opinion, which is what is so awesome.
Well, people can unfollow.
Back to the murkiness for a minute.
Yeah.
The other big thing that's kind of going on right now, especially as we go into Olympic year, is the role of intersex athletes in female sports, which is something
Yeah.
you've spoken about pretty frequently. So where are we at right now in terms of what's legal and what's not, and that whole confusing landscape?
Yeah, well, I don't actually know everything. I mean, this new stuff's coming out all the
It
time.
seems to be changing a lot.
In the World Championships, Caster Semenya wasn't competing in the women's 8, and the ruling around essentially built around her, but athletes that share a similar biology of being it's DSD, differences in sexual development. Intersex is another way of putting it, but differences of sexual development is kind of like the broader terminology. So yeah, around athletes that are born with differences in that way. And so, it seems like it's being fought in court. It's switching directions all the time. She won an appeal, and then the rule came back down. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've spoken about it a lot, but I actually haven't taken a strong stance because I feel like I still need more information.
Yeah.
It's so complicated. I 100% feel that every human being should have the benefits of sport in their life if they want them. I mean, the benefits of sport are too great. I don't want to put a wall between someone and sports just because of differences of sexual development or differences of gender identity or anything. And so I'm really uncomfortable with any wall or barrier put up for someone based on that. But participation in sports is one thing. Being a professional at something is another thing. And so I don't know. I just don't know. I know what it feels like to compete against the best in the world and compete against someone who I feel has an unfair advantage. If you have a difference of sexual development that has led you to go through male pattern puberty from testes that are functional, and you can actually use the androgens, because you could have internal testes but not be able to be insensitive to the androgens, which means you don't get the external changes in your body. But if you are sensitive to the androgens and you do undergo a traditionally male pattern of puberty, you have a different advantage.
Yeah.
You just do. And so, but then what do you do with that information? Do you just say, that's just the way it is? Maybe. I don't know yet. I still don't know.
The more that I've read up on this, the more confused I get.
Yeah.
And the more uncertain I am about my kind of knee-jerk reaction to it. Because on the one hand, you look at Caster, and this is not, to be clear, we're not talking about transgendered athletes. We're talking about people that are born a certain way. So I think Caster's medical records are sealed, so we don't know for sure, but everyone is fairly certain in suspecting that she's XY, right? That she has, that she certainly exudes these intersex qualities. Should she be punished for that because that's the way that she was born? It's certainly not her fault.
No, it's certainly not.
In the same way that Michael Phelps has gigantic feet or whatever, it's like this is what sport is. So we can't relegate her to the sidelines. It's to no fault of her own.
I mean, the only difference is that sport is divided into two categories,
right, male and female,
and it's not like swimming where it's divided by foot size.
Yeah. I know it's complicated.
And so it's hard.
There was a ruling that if you reduce that person's testosterone levels, then you create a more equitable field of play. But then was that overruled? I haven't been keeping track of.
Yeah,
the latest.
I think that what my understanding was that ruling was put back in place for the World Championships. Because I don't know why else Caster wouldn't have been able to compete.
Yeah, that's why Caster did.
But then, there's, I forget her name, Dr. Christina Karzes or something. She's written a book on testosterone and really downplaying testosterone as this critical, variable, that it is the one thing. Right?
Yeah, exactly. We can't put everything into that. And like you
but
said, some people,
the
amount of testosterone doesn't necessarily indicate the level, the impact that it's having. And that varies from physique to physique.
It does. And so But as someone who studied human biology at Stanford,
Yeah. You and
I'm
me
not
both.
like,
I was hum
yeah.
bio.
So there you go. Hey, it's, there is a difference in puberty of what happens with testosterone, and a combination of other hormones has an effect on the physique of the body. So, and the size of the lungs and all these other things. So it's like, I don't know, the person in me that sort of tries to pull my competitive side out. That's like, okay, pretend you were never an elite athlete. Pretend you're just a person who believes in human rights, and that's the most important thing. That version of me wants to say a person should just be able to compete however they want to compete. All types of women, even if that's complicated. But then that would include people who identify as female who were born male as well. I mean, I raced in a half marathon in Eugene, and there was a person who was transgender female who was competing, and I was passing her. And I remember thinking, I wonder, the competitive athlete in me was like, I wonder which category this person's entered in. I wonder if I just passed someone in, I was trying to move up through the women ranks, not as a professional anymore, but just because I'm competitive. And then I was like, why does it matter at this level that I'm at now? I'm not trying, I'm not fighting over limited resources, limited medals. Doesn't matter what category this person's in. I'm just stoked that they're out here having an amazing time in sport. But I had that wrestling inside still, So it's interesting being on the non-elite athlete side now, kind of seeing where you sit with it. So I don't know.
Well, I think when you're, post-retirement, it's not a zero-sum game anymore.
No.
But when you are competing at the highest level, it is a function of limited resources. There's only one gold medal. There's only so many spots that are going to comprise that Olympic team, and everybody's vying for that. And so these things become very acute.
They do, and it sort of makes me think one solution, which nobody's proposing, is to change some of that zero-sum culture of the sport. Why does it have to be that only medals are only people who win medals can actually make a living? Why is it that athletes go to the Olympics and don't get paid at all for going there while the IOC makes billions of dollars? Like, if you changed it where anyone who made the team is going to make money and they're going to be successful, which is a lot of how road races work. You get an appearance fee that's so big, it doesn't actually matter that much if you win a prize. So if you just get paid for being a professional, then your tension around someone who was born with different internal genitalia than you, being in the same race as you, is not such a big deal, really.
Right, because you're still going to be able to pay your bills.
You're going to be able to pay your bills, And so it's just like anything else. You deprive people to the point where they're at each other instead of trying to be at you, the person who makes the system.
Yeah, and I think it's exacerbated in sports like track and field and swimming, where there are a few at the very top who are doing very well.
Yeah.
And then there's all the journeymen people who are incredible athletes and are literally scraping by just to make a living. I was talking to a friend of mine just the other day, multiple gold medalist in swimming, who's going for it again. And it's like, it is... This person can't get sponsors. They're like trying to figure out how they're gonna make basically feed themselves to get to the Olympic Games. It's one of the most celebrated athletes that we have, and I just was thinking this is insane that
totally
this is
insane.
actually the case.
Totally insane.
And then we have Gavin Newsom, who's trying to initiate these changes in the NC2A to allow amateur athletes to I think these things are overdue.
They are way overdue. It's insane that the Olympic sports model depends on free labor, on a continually resurfacing group, or not resurfacing, regenerative group, right? It's always new people. There's never going to be a shortage of talent. They're going to keep coming up, and they'll do it for free. I mean, that's the model of this Olympics.
It's predatory.
Imagine if basketball or football was like that, where they were like, oh no, you just work for free all year, every year. If you win the Super Bowl, though, you'll get some money. Good luck making it to the Super Bowl without any money.
Right. And it's getting even more complicated now with social media, because people have realized, young athletes have realized that they are, I hate this word, but they're quote unquote brands, and they develop audiences young through their various channels. And when they're in college, should they be allowed to make money on their Instagram account or not? Like, is that a violation of NC2A rules? Like, what does it mean to be an amateur athlete anymore? And should that just go the way of the dodo altogether
I mean,
and
I
allow
think it
people to
should.
just make a living however they choose to?
I think so, absolutely. I'm not against some sort of go ahead and make your living and pay some sort of a tax on that subsidizes all varsity sports, for example. Like if you're going to be making money, like yes, the athletes are bringing in revenue for football and basketball at the college level. But also these other athletes that are building their brands, they rely on that system to have regular competitions for them to keep their brand up. And I think that there's this tension that all these smaller sports will disappear if we start letting top athletes get paid. It cuts into the NCAA's revenue, and they won't be able. All these other sports will get cut. All the whatever wrestling programs.
They could figure out a way for where it's being shared both ways.
Yeah, it should be.
In the same way that a college, if they're selling a jersey with the name of a student athlete on the back of it, it's insane to me that the athlete doesn't get to participate in that. And if there's an athlete who's got millions of Instagram followers and is monetizing that, then maybe some of that goes to the university or to the athletic federation, the
athletic department or something at their school or something like that. I mean, I think that's reasonable, but it seems just totally dumb to me that you shouldn't be able to make money on your Instagram account as an athlete, but your roommate who's not an athlete posts pictures of from like you know what I mean? Like Bobby Brown makeup, here we go. And they're getting paid. And you're like, this is so dumb.
Right. It is. It is, but it's amazing that it takes so long for these things to catch up.
Yeah.
We have to have endless debate and dialogue, and then 10 years goes by.
Yeah.
And a generation of athletes who could have, navigated their careers in a more functional, healthy way are sort of, dispensed with.
Yeah.
I
don't know, man.
Solve this problem for me,
Fair labor
Lauren.
practices. I mean, it just makes me think this is just one. Anytime I talk about sports, whether it's with pregnancy or labor practices, sports is one of the things that people love to talk about, but it's just one of many, 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 many industries where unfair labor practices exist, where discrimination against pregnant women or nursing women exists. It's endemic. So, but where I am okay talking about sports is that if it's on everybody's mind and we can make changes in sports, yes, this is a privileged group that can kind of make changes first sometimes. But if we can do that, and then that's not a conversation ender, but a conversation starter. And if athletes who make these victories then go to bat for everybody else, then I'm cool with it. I'm not cool with just stopping at sports, though. I feel like that's problematic to me.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that's what you guys are doing at Oiselle.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that and what Sally has created with this company. It's pretty cool.
You got to talk to Sally because she is way cooler than me. But
I follow her on Twitter. I've been following her for a long time.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's kind of an unlikely hero, She was like smoker, and you hear some common some common kind of background stuff, I think, a little bit. But sports saved her life, and she had this mixture of a passion for design and like creativity, and then this passion for running because running saved her life. And so Oiselle was really the combination of those two things. And I was really attracted to Oiselle because they were speaking to the woman athlete only. Whereas when I was at Nike, I remember we made this groundbreaking campaign called Objectify Me, and it was about making women-specific shoe. They kind of led the industry in making the first women-specific shoe. But even then, as proud as I am of that campaign, the entire thing is in reference to men. Men are still in the campaign.
Right.
My existence is in reference to men.
That campaign was a reaction to your conversation with Parker, right?
Yeah, it was. But I didn't even think about that until later when I joined Oiselle. It's only women. It's only women's stuff. It's only women in the office. None of our stories are in reference to male athletes. We're not like the female version of the men's this. Like it's just women runners, and that is a big enough group, right? And all the diversity within that group. So it's very refreshing. It's really cool, and I really kind of grew into myself as a woman through my relationship with Oiselle. Obviously, I was starting to find a feminist streak to be attracted to them, but it was really the conversations I was trying to have at Nike around motherhood, around trying to recognize that this new model of marketing had emerged and that the audience didn't care about performance only, they cared about the whole person, and in particular the whole woman in my case. And the fact that I couldn't get anywhere with that there. Meanwhile, I have one conversation with Sally Bergeson, CEO and founder of Oiselle, and she's like, well, yeah, obviously. Duh. I don't actually care if you win anything.
You mean I don't have to push this boulder up a mountain and have it roll on top of me every day?
She's like, if you like pushing the boulder up the mountain every day, great. Tell that story well, please. That'd be great. And she's like, really though, we want you to be you, and we want you to be you and shine brightly, because when you do that, it gives other women the feeling that they can do that too, and not be sort of limited into whatever box it is, which for me was a performance box in my industry. But every woman and person has their box they're being pushed into all the time about how to define themselves versus being self-approved. So yeah, my work with Oiselle, I'm just extremely proud of what we do there. The team that we've built, the different ways we've kind of made changes in the industry, but we're small. And so a lot of those things aren't going to be probably noticed on a global stage until much later. But I think that 20 years from now, when people are talking about big changes in sport, behind every one of those big changes with women, Oiselle has had an instrumental role, whether it was needling Nike or needling the press, engaging in conversations that help shift public opinion about things, and really doing it in that strong voice that you just described me as having. I mean, that's the voice Sally brings, and that they encourage their athletes to bring. And I mean, that is so different from most companies where they want you to be the superhero.
I remember it being a pretty radical thing when you signed with them.
Yeah, I mean, they joked at the time that they made as much money in a year. The revenue was the same size as left gloves sold at Nike.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's probably was still too small of a number, to be honest. But
were people telling you like, this is the wrong move, you're gonna destroy your career doing this?
I honestly think people just thought I was speaking a foreign language. No one told me don't do that. It was more like, what? You're doing? Yeah, just puzzlement. Like, who's Oiselle?
Right.
Who is what?
Wasn't there a weird thing where there was some meet, maybe it was trials, where the bibs had to have like a Nike logo on them, or you couldn't, like there was some confusion about like leading sponsors for an event coming into conflict with the brands that the athletes were allied with, that Oiselle found itself in the crosshairs with. I just remember reading something about that.
Yeah, well, I think maybe there's been a few things that have happened, but the story that came to mind for me was when they sponsored their first professional athletes. It was for the 2012 Olympic trials, and they were just they're this small, tiny little company, 2 years old or something at the time, or 4 years old at the time. They're trying to make their first elite kit for the U.S. Olympic trials stage, and they have to submit it for review, and it was like, well, no, you can't do that. 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 And they're like, make it smaller, make it less legible, make it, And she was like, well, can we put this bird pattern on it? No, too many birds, no birds allowed,
Wow.
And so they ended up with the most blasé jersey ever. And I'm sure Sally wouldn't mind me saying that, because it's true. It was just this kind of what was supposed to be an exciting launch of a new player, a women's focused player onto the national stage of a sport. You're like happy anybody new is putting money in track and field at this point. And the sort of welcome they received was just, it just showed why nobody wants to enter the sport.
Yeah.
It was just like, wow. But they've persisted, mostly because a couple of us really want them to. Yeah. I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to do it, but man, track and field needs them in there.
It's that thing where you want to widen the aperture to bring new people in and to create interest, and yet when you make those moves, you get shut down. It's the same. I think there's an aspect of that with the Kipchoge 159 thing too, where it's like, yeah, we want more people to be interested in track and field, but it has to be on our terms.
Yep.
It can't be in this other way that actually people are interested in paying attention to.
Yeah, totally. No, that's for sure true. Yeah, no, Sally's great though, and the work that we're going to do, I think over the next few years we'll continue to push those conversations forward. We've got Olympic trials next year, 2020. We're hosting the World Championships in Eugene, Oregon. First World Championships for track and field in the U.S. I mean, it's a big deal. Yeah, lots to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, let's track your story a little bit. You grew up not too far from here.
Yeah. Santa
Kick-ass,
Clarita.
kick-ass high school state champion runner. I'm sure you were recruited everywhere, right? But you end up going to Stanford and not on a scholarship.
Yeah. I know. Questionable life choice.
Well, I did the same thing.
You did? Yeah.
But I wasn't as good as you. I was a walk-on. I didn't deserve a scholarship.
Well, I was a little bit of a late bloomer in a way. I don't know, sort of under the radar. I was 14th at the Foot Locker Championships as a junior, and junior year is the most important year for recruiting. So I got a lot of letters from smaller schools and medium schools, but as far as that top 10 cross-country programs in the nation, I reached out to most of them. I was second at Foot Locker my senior year, so I was right up in there, and I won all my state titles senior year. So a lot of the money had been given away at these top cross-country schools to people who were stars as juniors. And I didn't have the home advantage of growing up in a household where college was normal. I mean, my mom and dad didn't go to college out of high school. My mom got her associate's degree the same year I graduated high school, actually. She went back to school for an associate's degree in business. And so none of them really knew the landscape. And so I didn't know I was way behind when I was writing these letters to the schools. Like, I didn't even know what early applications were. I'm not even using the right terminology because I still don't even know what it is. But so I wanted to look at the big ones at that time were Arizona, Northern Arizona, UCLA, which was right down the street, Stanford, and Colorado. Those are my top 5 and the ones I wanted to take recruiting trips to. And UCLA never wrote me a single letter. That was the weirdest one. My high school coach, Dave DeLong of Canyon High, bless him, he called the coach there at the time and was just like, "What are you doing, man? She lives right down the street. She just finished second at Foot Locker. Are you not interested?" And but in the end, I didn't want to be that close to home. I wanted to have a little bit of an adventure.
Yeah. So you walk on, and then you end up having this incredible career.
Yeah.
Winning all kinds of NC2A titles, like some crazy number of All-American, like 15 All-American across cross-country and track and field.
Yeah.
And in so doing, like from what I gather, at the time, the men's program was a very congealed, they called it the machine or something like that,
it was
right?
a machine. Yep, still is, I think.
And you were starting to notice, why isn't the women's program kind of operating with this same perspective and philosophy? And you worked hard to try to cultivate that and create that in your own way.
Mm-hmm. I did, and it was really difficult. I really envied the environment of the machine on the men's side. But since then, now that I'm a coach and now that I have more perspective on kind of how misogyny and sexism works, I have a different view of what was going on there. And it still goes on today all across country. It might even still be going on there. I don't know. But a lot of times what you have is a men's head coach. It's like 90-something% of the coaches at that time were men. I don't know what it is now, but it's still really, really high. And they're head men's and women's coach, and they hire an assistant that generally works with the women's team, and that head coach kind of dances in and out of their involvement with the women's team.
Oh, so there isn't a separate head women's coach?
A lot of times, no. We had an assistant women's coach when I was there, and that persisted. Even just talking to Rebecca Mira, who's an athlete I coach now, who graduated there, there was often a similar dynamic going on of that head coach of both programs, but really the women's team was second priority, and they often trusted an assistant, oftentimes a woman assistant, which is an amazing gesture. But then when you really look at how that works career-wise, that person is doing crazy amounts of work and making pennies for it, and they don't actually have full power. They still have to kind of check in with the head coach all the time. And so when you're an athlete interacting with a coach in that way, especially at a school like Stanford, where these athletes were best in the nation, top recruits. We were ranked number 1 every single year I was there, but we never finished first. But you had this feeling that you weren't important and you weren't really getting what you deserved. And so many times you'd ask your assistant coach for something and they'd have to go check with the head coach. It was just really weird. But when I was at Stanford, I went into Vin's office when I saw this dynamic, and I was like, this isn't going to work for me. I need you to coach me, and he did. He ended up being kind of my direct coach, but he really only worked with, I don't even know, one. I might have been the only woman he worked with regularly.
Well, one of the things you've written about, it speaks to a larger issue, which is across all sport, men versus women, in that you have these young men, they're coming into their, full-blown testosterone fueled bodies.
Yeah.
Right?
Natural performance enhancing drug right
and
there.
it kind of lends itself to creating that cohesiveness in a team construct.
Yeah.
I experienced that as an athlete at Stanford. And conversely, what you have with women are bodies that are changing. You're having, interesting things that are happening physiologically that are very different from that tend to push women apart from each other rather than create that cohesion.
Yeah, and you're right. You have biology is playing a completely different role. You're either going to be, if you're lucky, a plateau for a little while, but most women experience some sort of performance dip. And then so that's massively at play. Then you add in kind of inherited gender weird shit where socially women are taught to view each other as competitors for limited prizes. And I know men have their own version of that, but for women, there's a tendency to tear one another down. I think that a lot of that is changing, or maybe it's just in my world. I don't feel that at all anymore anywhere I go, but I definitely felt that when I was younger. You were careful to make a woman to really trust another woman who was a competitor for something. And then you add those team dynamics, like I just said, of like you get less of the attention of the most powerful person. You're fighting for that limited resource.
It just fuels that scarcity mindset.
Yeah. And so you have all these different things making it difficult to be a cohesive unit, to kind of expect what you can achieve. And so you get this ranking, a national ranking based on prepubescent bodies. And then half of your team is going through a pretty significant weight fluctuation and performance fluctuation that's just natural, that can be ridden out and overcome through time. But that also is something that I really am passionate about, is treating women's running culture as its own entity to be respected and normalized instead of comparing it to men. So part of the normal expected trajectory of women athletes is a plateau or a dip. That's normal, and it doesn't need to be bad. It can be celebrated if it's part of the expectation. And so we have to find ways to build team culture around that. We need coaches to be educated around that. There has to be a little bit of a broadening of an athlete's value during that period of time when their performance is dipping, so that has to be baked into the culture of the team. You may need to develop the pride of being the fifth scorer on your cross-country team when you're used to being the one breaking the tape, right? And that's a transition that is difficult.
Do you feel like that's getting noticed and appropriately kind of acknowledged? Because I feel like the typical scenario, and like I'm an old man, so I don't know what's really going on now, but you have coaches saying you're too heavy, you got to lose weight, and these transitionary phases just foment disordered eating habits and body body issues and all the like. That is a big thing of what you're constantly talking about.
That's still the biggest problem, is that these women's changes in their bodies are met with exactly the opposite of what they need. They're met with, if you're a dedicated athlete, you'll lose this weight. And it's like, wait a second, what if what your body needs is to actually go through this period of change, and then it will even itself out? I mean, if you look at the athletes who have had longevity, the female athletes who have longevity, and you look back at their college pictures before they became pros, they all went through these body changes and weathered them.
But you have a coach who's like, his horizon is just NCAA championships in 4 months or whatever. It's like he's not thinking about the 5-year career plan of...
Totally, because what's incentivized for the coaches is, where is this all baked in, right? Look at the system. Are they incentivized only based on their podium finishes, or could we incentivize them by how many women continue running after college? Maybe you need a different metric of success when you are in charge of a group of women going through this particular phase of life than just make them deliver top-notch NCAA performances. And I know that's asking a lot, and it sounds crazy, but a lot of these coaches' jobs aren't as at risk as you'd think. They're in there for a long time. And I have seen some changes, women or men coaches getting let go and pushed out for creating negative body image culture. I get people come up to me all the time because of the letter I wrote to my younger self through Mile Split that Wazell printed 500 copies of and personally mailed to coaches around the country.
Oh, did they? Wow.
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff they do that's like way different.
Yeah.
Non-traditional marketing dollars spent. And and it is making a difference. I have coaches in particular. It makes me happy when I have male and female coaches working with high school kids. They're like, I give your letter to your younger self to my team every year or whatever it is. And then I know that in some way their perception on body changes has changed. I don't know if I'm influencing the college level. It's hard to know. They're kind of insular. So
I love that letter that I read it again this morning.
Oh.
I'll link it up in the show notes.
Cool.
But talk a little bit about what inspired that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Mile Split team asked me if I'd write a letter to my younger self because they were doing a series from professional athletes, and I jumped on it because I had been really immersing myself in eating disorder culture and body image, negative body image culture, and the toxic effect it was having on women's teams and individual women. And I thought, this is an area where I can make a difference because I've been steeped in it so much and trying to learn and understand it. And so, yeah, Dr. Melody Moore, she's a clinical psychologist who specializes in eating disorder recovery. She actually lives out around this area. She was a big influence on helping me understand the clinical side because I had sort of the performance side and my own lens on it. And I had a good understanding of the challenges baked into the culture, the specific culture of high performance sport. And she had the broader lens of how the disease works and the beauty myth that women are facing on the whole. So yeah, I just tried to pull all that together in this letter to my younger self in a way that would translate it the most direct way I could to like those minds, you know. So I don't know. I'm proud of it. It seems like it's worked better than I could have hoped, but it's
still relevant and still gets shared and spread around.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, more needs to be done than a letter.
When did you write it? It wasn't that
I don't know,
recently.
a few years ago, a couple years ago. Yeah. I think that what my dream at the time, and kids have made this challenging. They've really made it challenging to kind of do all the things I really want to do, as anyone with kids knows.
Tell me about it.
But I had this vision of following up that letter to my younger self with proposed changes at the NCAA level and the national high school level of kind of like a suggested curriculum for coaches for how to better understand the role they play in creating eating disorder culture and negative body image culture, and really bringing a gravity to them to understand the role that they play for better or for worse, and to kind of help them develop some best practices. I really wanted to do that, and I haven't. I went so far, I did this survey, it had like almost 800 participants talking about their experiences with body image culture. It's so much work, you know?
Yeah.
It's just so much.
That's a worthy investment of your time, though.
It would be.
Yeah.
It would be, but how do you know?
Well, listen, you're excelling in so many categories. You're an incredibly capable human being. I mean, like, in addition to being like the elite of the elite at running, you're this crazy entrepreneur. You're an unbelievable writer. Like, I've written down here, like, when is this memoir coming out? Like, I mean, I've been following your writing for a very long time, and just thought years ago you would have come out with a book. You know, like, I know you have your journals and they're amazing and all of that, but like a book.
Yeah,
you know,
book.
This is
at least
something
one.
you have to do. And, you know, like, I texted Jesse last night. I was like, Lauren's coming in, like, what's non-obvious that I can talk to her about that I'm not going to find on Google or whatever? And he's like, she's a musician. She just writes songs and like wants to sing. I was like, on top of everything else, you're like a musician too. I have a guitar back there. You're welcome to pick
exciting.
it up and play. You know, parents, like all the things that you do, and the fact that you're at all beating yourself up because there's something else that you have an ambition around that you don't have time for. I mean, this is the human condition.
It is. I've never had a shortage of ideas, but I'm not the best at executing them without like a good team, or at least a good partner, you know? And a lot of the work that I've been able to do in the last couple of years has been because I've had the team of Wazell behind me that is essentially cheering me on every step of the way and being like, how can we help? How can we elevate what you're trying to do? And that's massively encouraging. It can take something from the idea to action, right? And I wasn't going to print 500 letters to my younger self and research all the addresses and of every high school that I could think of. And, I wasn't going to be able to do that, but they could say, hey, this is important to you. This is important to women's running. We're going to do it. And then the same with the Believe Journal. My former competitor and dear friend, Ro McGettigan from Ireland, because of her, it went from an idea to actually happening. She was married to a graphic designer, and she was able to help make this imaginary book come to life on a computer, which could then be printed. It would have just floated around. You do like a new one every
year, right? Like you're updating
Yeah,
it.
we update it and refresh it and stuff like that. We haven't done a big overhaul in a couple of years, but we're going to do a big overhaul to the content for the next one.
Right.
Yeah, but the book is the thing I really want to do, and that's
you got to do that.
I want to do that. I need to do it. When you are going crazy on the days you aren't writing, you need to write. Mm-hmm. It's a very aggravated state.
It's hard. I know a guy who's a big time writer director in Hollywood, like big time, and he's got a bunch of kids. And he's like, each one of my kids cost me like 3 movies.
Yeah, it's the truth, man.
That's the reality that no one wants to talk about in our, hustle culture. It's like you can do it all. And it's like you're somebody who's doing a lot, but you still can't do everything and be a present partner and parent and, keep all these super important things in check.
Yeah. I mean, the way I try to think of it now is there's all these things not being made, but I'm making something that can't be marketed or sold that I don't even understand yet when it comes to my marriage and my kids, right? And so at least that's the lullaby I sing to myself at night when I'm feeling anxious and I want to write at my computer until 2 a.m, but that would be a bad move since Zadie gets up at 6. I'm like, you know what? You're making something else there.
Yeah.
It's not wasted time, but yeah, it's tough. It is tough. Yeah. I really struggle.
Yeah.
I struggle with motherhood for sure.
Your struggles are well documented in terms of your athletic career as well. Like this is you're I think Lindsay in that beautiful New York Times that sort of elegy that she wrote to you upon your retirement was like, Lauren is the best American distance runner to never make an Olympic team. And it seemed like every time there was an Olympiad, something interfered to prevent you from realizing that dream. And I just wonder, like, what your perspective is on all of that now, looking back, thinking, like, what could have been, what is, being in acceptance and moving forward. I mean, you have an incredible life, so it's not like there's nothing to lament, but I would imagine there are still, you still have this sense of, like, it was supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
And it went another way.
For sure. I often think about how much easier certain things would be if I had the title of Olympian, if just one of those years had gone slightly differently, The hardest of those years being 2008, because I was an alternate for the team. Up until the last minute, I didn't know because there were a couple athletes doubling 10K, 5K, and I was in the 5K. And so I didn't know up until the last minute if somebody would decide not to come back in the 5K. And so I just stayed on guard and I trained all the way up to that Olympics. So I was like the ghost Olympian back home that never was. Right. And I was really sort of in denial about it until it was like the last possible moment I could be called. And I always was aware that while the Olympics was an obvious goal, society feeds you, right? It's the most obvious goal, that it wasn't the only thing to make it worth it. I just knew it would make things easier. It would open doors. Yeah. So I wanted it. I wanted it out of pride because I would have earned it. But then, And so I think about that sometimes with, like, even this book I'm working on. How do I write the book proposal? Do I write it as the fastest runner to never make the Olympics? Tells her story of, whatever. But it's just part of my story. And I think that what I have seen is that when you accomplish one of those things that is so easily identified as, quote, success, Olympic medal, whatever, I think it would be harder in some ways to be self-approved. I feel like I was sort of forced into finding self-approval in my career because I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get that ultimate prize. I can't go by the title Olympian. I don't have people going around telling me I accomplished everything in the sport that I set out to do. So it's like, well, I got to find the peace there. I got to find peace with that. And that's the theme of life anyway. Everyone has to find eventually. So not getting what I want pushed me there sooner.
Well, when you get what you want, it's harder to reckon with yourself in an honest way.
Yeah,
can,
there you go.
Tell yourself a bunch of bullshit,
Yeah.
and everyone pats you on the back.
Yep,
And when it doesn't go your way, then you really have to kind of get honest.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that when I got what I wanted, until I didn't, but when I got what I wanted, there was a part of me that always felt I deserved it. And then when I didn't get what I wanted, I was like, but I deserve it. And then it kind of clicked like, oh, there's people everywhere that deserve something and don't get it. I never deserved any of it. No one deserves anything really, So I don't know. I think I would like to think I'm a better person because I didn't get what I want, but I don't really know.
Do you spend a lot of mental energy thinking about it, or is that just in the past now? I mean, because you're a coach and you're still very much in the sport, it's not like you've just put that's in the rear view and now you have this whole other life.
Yeah, I have a conflicted feeling about staying in the sport actually for that reason. I mean, when I was thinking about retiring, a big part of me wanted to just close the door and leave it behind. And I've seen a lot of my peers do that, and it's very tempting because it eats at you. There's the more you stay in the sport, the doping stuff keeps eating at you. My 7th in the world finish with all these suspicious people in front of me.
How many people have you raced that have beaten you who have been toppled by doping or are under the dark suspicion of
tons.
that kind of behavior?
And they I don't think I'll ever really know. So it's just there's a big part of me that's like I would be happy shutting the door, diving into music and writing, never writing really about sport. But then because I do love the coaching and I do really love my relationship with Oiselle and this kind of broader women's athlete movement, I get to be involved in sport in a way that is very holistic, where I'm constantly learning. And it does mean that I am kind of always getting pinged by my past still because I am engaged and it's just over there. But it also gives me the opportunity to continue rewriting that story in my mind. I'm like, actually, that was really good. What I did was really good. And actually, with a few more years under my belt, it didn't really matter that much that I didn't make the Olympics or whatever.
I think with every successive year, it becomes less important.
Yeah.
And your voice is as strong as ever, and the influence that you wield over your sport and just the conversation that swirls around female empowerment, both in sport and outside of sport, continues to build and grow.
Yeah, and it will continue to build and grow. And we need voices who have an expertise in performance in that conversation.
It's almost better because, well, here's the thing, because if you just won every race you were in, you become very unrelatable.
That's true.
And your whole thing is being relatable and being honest and here's what it looks like, warts and all.
Yeah.
But the minute you don a gold medal, then it's like, oh, well, it's easy for her to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the fact that you didn't get what you wanted and, there is an argument that, shoulda, coulda, woulda kind of thing, it makes you kind of more endearing.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, more.
And I think that helps you connect with the people that are interested in what you have to say.
I feel that.
Yeah.
And I think it gives me a little bit of a I was going to say chip on my shoulder, but it's not even that with my coaching. Because I feel like I have a very specific coaching philosophy with the elite athletes I coach, which is I will train them to be among the best in the world, but not at the expense of their personhood. And I had to sort of fight to reclaim the importance of my personhood during my career. I had a few years where I thought it was like a liability and that I should just be this drone monk runner person. And that was the best way to go. So I was shutting out any other part of me, the musical part, any other part of me really. And I was like, no, I want to be a whole person. And I ended up having good results doing that against a better judgment of the quote experts in my field. So I coach with a fervor around that now. Who are you? Let's not lose who you are. Let's chase this thing. Yeah, you need to make choices. You can't do everything all the time, but you shouldn't lose track with who you are because you can only be you as an athlete. Don't try to be her. Don't try to be whatever. And so it means that I really need to get to know who they are as people in order to do that. And I feel like I have something to prove there too. I want my success to be measured by how many of those people, of these women, leave the sport without an identity crisis, without going through a sinking depression, due to the impossibility of transitioning back into a human self.
Right.
And is it possible to get great results that way? we're finding out.
Yeah.
We're getting pretty good ones.
How's it going?
Great. Yeah.
How many athletes do you have now?
We have 6 on the team. I coach 5. Yeah. So, but it's really, I mean, we have a pretty magical environment, and actually crosses outside of track and field, which is really exciting because we've got Lindsay Corbin and Heather Jackson of the Ironman crew. I don't coach them. I do some like kind of advising with Heather, but on the running side, but they come and work out with us. Like our gates are open to kind of bring in that champion culture for one another in Bend, because they live in Bend.
Right.
And that's just so exciting to me. It's like being able to do that in town is like phenomenal.
It's pretty cool in this tiny little idyllic little Whoville where you live.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
watching them compete at Kona was just,
Lindsay she got 10th, I think?
Yeah, she was 10th, yeah.
She seems really cool. I've never met her, but she seems awesome.
She is amazing.
And she won Wisconsin, I think, right? This year?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And then Heather got 5th. And had a great day. I think she's finished as high as 3rd before, but she's also had some significantly worse than 5th. So it's good to see her have a good one.
That's cool. And how did Jesse fare not being in Kona this year?
It was pretty tough. I think it kind of came up on him quickly right at the last minute because he's so invested in picky bars and his work and the family that. I don't feel like he dwells on it every day, but yeah, I started to get closer and the media buzz is building and he's like, I kind of wish I was there even just socially to connect with people. I think he's starting to feel pretty like it's moving in the rearview mirror, and I think that's tough.
Well, there's similarities between the two of your stories. Like he's dealing with these injuries and, is facing, what's next for him. What does his relationship with professional sports look like? And I think that's a tough, confusing, emotional place to be.
It is.
While also raising kids and trying to run this company and do all the other things.
I look at Jesse's story as an example of how masculinity is packaged and sold in sport, being archaic, where I was in 2012 sitting in the room with Mark Parker at Nike trying to talk about the value of the complete person. Jesse is this guy who, is a CEO of Picky Bars. He's an incredible dad. He is very passionate about equally shared parenting, really sharing the emotional labor of home life, which is very against kind of traditional ideas of masculinity, right? And these are things that are on the forefront of conversations around redefining masculinity in our culture right now to kind of help with some of the major problems we're facing as a society, right? Around violence against women, terrorism, all these things that are generally perpetuated among men, and the unique ills that men face. The article in the New York Times I think I read recently was about the average man having a difficult time having these emotional intimacy in their friendships, right? Because of these antiquated views of masculinity. And Jesse's just such an awesome example of being kind of on the forefront of really doing it differently. So at a point in his career where he's experiencing all this friction, like it's all going to need to be behind him because of work and family, I'm like, why isn't this just the beginning in some ways for your career as a professional athlete? Like it can look different. It doesn't have to look the same. Like you couldn't do it the way you could before, but why is it considered less valuable necessarily if you want to do it differently?
Well, I would agree with everything that you just said and echo all of that. But I think what happens is all of that sort of progressive sensibility butts up against a traditional idea of what it is to be a man that we still can't quite escape, which is I need to be this champion and I need to be this breadwinner and this is what it means to be masculine. And when you don't achieve those goals or ambitions for yourself, there's a sense of emasculation that takes place that makes you feel less than or less than a man, or like this is where I'm supposed to be at this point in my life and I'm not, and I feel like there's a weird kind of not shame, but like a sense of insecurity, I think, that goes hand in hand with that.
Yeah. What do you think can be done about it?
I'm far be it from me to give anybody advice. I can only share my own personal experience, but I've gone through this And I remember as I was trying to figure out who I wanted to be as I was transitioning out of law, it was a very confusing time. And it was also there was a lot of financial hardship. And I have vivid memories of being down at the park in Malibu with my two daughters, like pushing them on the swings. And it was like 2:00 on a Tuesday, and it's a bunch of moms.
Yeah.
And I'm down there, and I had these conflicting emotions of like, how cool is it that I can be in the middle of a weekday, I can be at the park with my daughters when they're young in this precious moment, versus the conflicting and probably more powerful sentiment, which is like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
like,
what are you doing with your life, man?
You have nothing going on, and like you're down here in the middle of the day and you don't even know what you're doing. Like, this is not the way it's supposed to look. Mm-hmm. And that creates a kind of vertigo that the only way through that is to stay with it. And I think the answers are within the self. Like Jesse knows what the path is, and those solutions come when you can find those moments of stillness and clarity, with the clarity around those intuitions comes when you carve out that time to really connect with yourself. And it's not going to come from some other person saying, do this or don't do this.
Yeah, that's true. And it kind of reminds me of in the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about the power of marketing to shift public perceptions, and we were talking about doping and Nike, but the power of sports marketing to kind of shift what masculinity looks like is there too. Because these ideas that you're describing having are just like inherited through messaging. Yeah. That's what it is. That's how they get there. Whether it's from media or what you saw from your own parents as kids or whatever, like they're not, they're not like givens, as in they don't just exist for no reason. No,
they're just norms. They're social contracts that are reinforced through basically our daily experience and everything that we see and hear and are exposed to.
And there's so much happening with women right now in marketing, where the marketing machine of business is, for their own sake, to make money because it's hot right now, they're helping shift the narrative around the feminine identity. And who's going to be at the forefront from a business side of shifting masculine identity and capitalizing on that shift, because it's coming, I think, in a big way. It's happening around us.
Yeah.
But I just wonder who's gonna who's gonna be the first like male specific company really jumping on that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Well, I don't know. Jesse's available for that ad campaign, right?
Sure. I mean, if he wants to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. He's my inspiration.
Well, I mean, look, he's amazing, and everything that you guys are doing. There's something about, I experienced this with my wife as well. Like, both of you guys have your respective paths and kind of lanes that you're in, and you're excelling in those. And you're very independent, like, and strong people. But there's an alchemy that when you come together, whether it's through your podcast or these other various things that you do, there's something like exponentially more awesome about that.
Yeah. I wish we had more time to capitalize on that together.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the nature of young kids. It's like we're at the age where a bunch of people are splitting up. They got young kids this age, and it causes so much tension. But I actually feel like the podcast is like saving our marriage sometimes.
Yeah, I feel
because
that.
we have this weekly time where we get to see the way that 1 + 1 is more than 2 when we're together.
And the formality of the mics, it just creates a structure that forces you to be present for that, and you can't be like checking your phone or whatever.
You can't. Yeah.
So I have a joke with my wife. It's like, I think we need to like do a podcast because we gotta like talk.
We need to talk. Yeah. It's, I don't know, man. I definitely feel like optimistic about the future with Jesse. I think it's exciting. I sometimes get jealous of future us. Like, if we can just make it to future us where we have more time to spend together with just us, we just got to make it like 4 more years. Because if we can make it 4 more years, still liking each other a lot, still loving each other, we're going to be able to drop 2 kids off with someone who will take them for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And we can do some cool adventures together. And sometimes it feels like I spend a lot of time admiring Jesse from afar, even though he's in my home, because there's so much of like all right, you take the kids. I'm going to go out for a run. I'll take the kids. You go out for your bike ride. You're leaving next weekend for this work thing. I'm leaving the next weekend for this work thing. You know, and we get these short conversations, and our communication is good, but we just don't have that much time for depth. So it feels a little bit like we're on hold sometimes.
Well, here's a little tip.
Yeah, give me a tip.
By the time you get to that point, you're going to lament, you know, that the thing is, it's
so what
like,
do we do?
You have to appreciate the moment that you're in.
Yeah.
Because it is precious, and the kids do grow up so fast. And all of that future tripping, takes you out of being present for what is actually happening.
It's
for all
true.
those super advanced moments, that are hard, but great. And to the extent that you can leverage them to cultivate intimacy and grow closer to Jesse, like that's the beautiful potential of the whole thing. So that when you get to that point where you can drop them off, you actually aren't going to want to. You're going to want to bring them with you.
Yeah, that too. Well, what would you write in your letter to your younger self about that period of time?
I'm interviewing you. I would say that so many of the fears and anxieties were completely like justifiable and legitimate, but also turned out to not happen. And the amount of energy that I put into them was ridiculous. So my letter would be to trust yourself, above all, and to invest the time required to get to know who you are, so that you can figure out what that voice is trying to express, and be fearless in the expression of that. And if you can create fidelity to that your life will unfold in front of you. Probably not the way you want it to, or on the timeline you would prefer it to, but that's really the only path. We're here to grow, and to the extent that you can invest yourself in that personal growth, I really think that the answers that you're seeking are revealed in that way.
Yeah, that's great advice. It makes me feel a little better about the path I'm on. But it also is something you have to constantly recommit to, because there's, I feel like that's my intention, but then life comes along in these, moments of choices and whatever.
But that's also how you coach your athletes, right?
Yeah.
It's adaptability. It's not about like, here's the plan and we have to be perfect. It's about being malleable, so that you can absorb whatever life is throwing at you.
Yeah. That requires a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Adaptability requires confidence.
And I think people look at, like you're on the cover of Outside Magazine on a dock, and like you have this beautiful life and these beautiful kids and this business, and it all looks fantastic. And what I appreciate is just the honesty with which you share like the struggles and how difficult it is. And I think it's fun to tune into your podcast, and there'll be questions about like, what gel do I use? And then the next question is like, what is venture capital? It's like,
it is kind of amazing the breadth of things people write in about, and it's fun. I really enjoy doing that.
I think you need to write this book.
What do you think? What do you want to know in the book?
What do I want to know?
Yeah, what do you want to know?
I think it to me, it almost doesn't matter. Like the narrative is less important than just your voice, because there's something very specific about the way that you write that's very identifiable, that dates all the way back to when you started blogging. It's just this unapologetic honesty that's so refreshing. So to me, it almost doesn't matter what you decide to focus on. It's the voice, I think, that I connect with. And I think that's needed, especially like a strong female voice who's honest, who has integrity, who can speak truth to power, and like elevate, the feminine, the strength in the feminine, I think is something that we need in our culture.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. So where are we at with that?
Well,
I'm going to press you on this.
Yeah, you can press me on it. I am obviously more committed than ever to honest truth telling, and my writing style is to just say things how they are. And if I find that I'm dancing around something, I try to just cut right into it and get right to the truth of the matter. So right now, where I'm at in the writing process is kind of recommitting to the book. I was in a real groove. I'm sure any writer can relate to this, but in a real groove of writing, having it in my everyday. And then coaching started to ramp up, and I host these wilder retreats where we do running and writing, and those take a lot of time.
Is that women only? Because I want to go to one of those.
You can come to the co-ed one.
Run and write.
You can
That's
come
like
to the co-ed one.
Those
Yeah,
are the two things I like to do.
Most of them are women only, but I do host them for men and
Is
women.
Julia
too.
Hanlon still involved?
Yeah, she's teaching the yoga at the retreats. She's awesome. Yeah, what was I talking about?
Writing.
Oh, yeah,
writing
writing.
process,
So my book.
Wilder.
Yeah. So I put it away. I put it in the drawer. And then I recently was going crazy because I'm not writing. So I'm spending time writing in my mind, in my bed, pissed that I didn't write during the day. I'm at that stage of the creative process. But I needed to essentially do when the track season was over for the athletes I was coaching, I needed to kind of create better boundaries around what my coaching time is, when my creative time is, and what my family time is, because all of them were just bleeding into one another, and spending too much time on my phone in front of my kids because I'm getting coaching stuff coming in at 9:00 at night. And basically anything can pull away from writing time because writing is hard and you have to sit alone in a chair. And so suddenly I'm scheduling everything on top of my writing time. So I really did that exercise of sitting down and reclaiming my time. And now I have a schedule. So that's really helped. It's been a week. Yeah. So I'll let you know how it goes. But I am writing
Good. I'm
again.
Glad to hear that.
And
it's just about momentum.
Yeah,
too,
it is.
You know,
it is. It's like anything in that way. So.
How do you deal with? I'm sure you get this question a lot. Like, you guys, you and Jesse are so enmeshed in your business and your personal lives. Like, there's this idea like, oh, there needs to be boundaries around like when we stop talking about business and when it's just our time. And I just know for me, that's kind of like setting myself up to fail because I can't really live up to that. Okay, now here's the iron curtain that's going down on work. And it's like, this is our lives. Like, this is what we're involved in. This is what's top of mind. These are the things we need to talk about. So I don't do a very good job in the traditional sense of like creating boundaries around that. And I'm wondering how you guys do that.
We've had to be pretty strict with it. I think Jesse's like you. I don't think it's his natural inclination to want to do it, but I grew up in a household where boundaries weren't really super safe. Like, my dad was an alcoholic. He was an amazing guy, but he was kind of an explosive alcoholic. And so it's really important to me that there's going to be kind of like a feeling of safety around what we're going to talk about. And with work is not safe for me. Talking about picky bars at dinner, or like, I don't know, just having it kind of come out of left field when I'm thinking about something else, it affects me in a really negative way. And part of that is the boundaries thing from growing up, but part of it is my relationship with risk is so much different from Jesse's. And so every conversation about picky bars comes back to risk for me. I mean, our names are co-signed on every loan. They could take our house if picky bars can't pay their bills. That's normal entrepreneurship stuff that Jesse's more comfortable with me because of his upbringing and his personality. I grew up without a lot of money and,
chaos.
So I don't, it's not safe. It's not a safe space.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So how did you end up with such a stable, stand up, good dude? Like, how come,
I know.
You know what I mean? Did you go to a lot of therapy?
I have, but after I met him, I think, my mom used to tell me that she grew up with an alcoholic dad and she married an alcoholic. And so I knew from a young age that there was a pattern, and she told me straight up, don't marry an alcoholic. Yeah. Plus, we had a lot of mental illness in our family, and especially bipolar disorder. So all three of my mom's siblings have or had bipolar disorder when they were alive. And so the risk factors, if you're genetically predisposed, alcohol and drug use, lack of sleep, tons of stress. So those things I was aware of from a young age too, because my mom was the one kid that managed to avoid that. And she was worried about my sister and I. And so I had this like double fear around alcohol in particular. So for me, I really was drawn to kids in high school who had good, clean fun. I spent a lot of time hanging out with Mormons and Christians, even though I'm not a person of faith. And Jesse was sort of the first person I met who was similar to me, but not a person of faith. He didn't have his first drink of alcohol until like 2 months before his 21st birthday. And he got busted. The first time he held a cup in his hand at a college party ever, he got an MIP. minor in possession. Which is
on campus at Stanford?
Campus at Stanford. Like, seriously, that's the kind of luck. So, but I was really attracted to the fact that he didn't need those things to be himself or to be comfortable around other people. And I felt safe with him. So yeah, I definitely tractor beamed to that secure stability.
Yeah, you transcended.
Yeah, I made it out.
Yeah, you didn't step on the landmine. That's amazing.
I didn't.
You know?
Yeah.
And did you go to Al-Anon as a kid or anything like that?
No, and I was just talking to my mom about that.
Dad never got sober?
Nope, not well. I don't know. Maybe forced sober when he had liver cancer because he couldn't drink when you're on the chemo and stuff. But no, he never did. He was pretty high functioning. I mean, he always kept his jobs and stuff. But I think in that industry, there's a ton of alcohol use is pretty common. So yeah, he never did. But I think there is some element of that environment that I grew up in that I miss though. Like all his buddies they always had a beer in their hand. They were always down to party. They were always having fun.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster.
So much laughter. Yeah.
Like for all the, when it all falls apart, it's bad. But there's an aspect of it that's very exciting.
It is. It is very exciting.
And you never know what's going to happen.
You don't. You don't.
Yeah.
So I do. I am kind of that person in the relationship, not with substances, but I'm the live wire, the unpredictable, the spontaneous one. And Jesse's so stable that sometimes we have friction around that of like the predictable versus the unpredictable, But that's a minor problem.
You should be able to roll with like being, on the lease and everything
think.
like that. Yeah.
Money's different. I don't know. There's something about that.
Well, when you grow up without it,
you're
going to have a different relationship with it, of course.
That's true. Like going to Stanford, like sports was my way out into a different future, right? I didn't get a scholarship freshman year at Stanford,
then you earned it
but I
along the
was
way.
Told when I went on my recruiting trip that if I competed well, I'd get one every other year. And since I was young and naive, I never considered that wouldn't happen. I never considered I'd get hurt or anything. I was like, oh, okay, great. So that's as good as you telling me that I only have to pay for
first year.
One part of, we got financial aid. So one part of 1 year. And luckily I didn't get hurt and I did get that support in the other years. And so it made a difference, but it always felt like tenuous. Like I would take ketchup packets from fast food restaurants because I didn't have money to buy a bottle of ketchup, or I would buy my gas like $2 at a time, just like limping my car along. I didn't have a credit card or debit card like my buddies on the team. I couldn't do that. I had friends that were giving me their old hand-me-down clothes, and I had friends that would always magically buy me my milkshake at post-race celebrations, and I got by with a lot of support from people, but I kind of always felt like I had no business being there. So I didn't grow up with any money management skills. So I think Jesse had entrepreneurial parents, and I think he just has a lot of confidence, and he went to business school, and he's just kind of, I think, more familiar. And I get better and better. He's just realized he has to really explain it to me, and I need to feel really safe. I need all the information, but when I'm ready for it. And not at dinner.
It's good that you guys understand that about each other, because then you can make sure that those needs are fulfilled. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And I think every risk taker kind of can benefit from a voice of reason in their life. So I like to think that I help keep picky bars on like a more reasonable path of risk, or maybe a slightly more conservative approach than he may otherwise take. Only time will tell how that turns out. But we're almost 10
How's
years.
How's it going?
10 years. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where is it at? Like since I talked to Jesse, like where you guys are you had like a couple supply chain things, but it seems like you sorted everything out.
And when you talked to Jesse, he was just kind of diving in full time to the business. After Challenge Roth and kind of deciding he was going to go on sabbatical and apply his tenacity, his iron person tenacity to the business. And he has had an amazingly successful year. So the company is doing well. We've had a few profitable months, nothing crazy, but just to like the model's working. He can see clear year-over-year numbers that his time and his effort has worked, and that the decisions we've made have been beneficial. And it feels good to see him kind of walk around feeling proud of himself for something so non-sport related.
That's cool.
And I do feel safer and safer. Anytime you're in the black, business feels better.
Yeah. Well, a decade in, you've had 10 years of uncertainty, and you guys are still doing it. So that should also make you feel like you're probably going to be okay.
I still feel like our most profitable year was when we were working out of our home kitchen, because your overhead is nothing.
Right.
You know, like we're selling millions more picky bars, but it's so much harder to make the numbers work, because the food business and just business in general is just, it still doesn't totally make sense to me why it's easy when you're tiny, and then it's almost impossibly hard until you get to some magic number like 10 million or 20 million in revenue. And then as soon as you get there, things start to change again. They scale in a different way.
I think a lot of businesses are like that. My wife was in the garment business, and it was the same thing. Like when you're small, it's fine, and then you get into that nether zone, that middle zone, and she had like a very complicated line, and she was doing all the big department stores and all that kind of stuff. But they, their terms of when they pay her were crazy, and it's like was constantly teetering on disaster like the whole time. And the only way that you become like Tommy Hilfiger is somebody gives you like an insane amount of money to get you over that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that we are kind of at that level where we have to decide, do we try to find money and try to grow it faster, or do we kind of stay the course on this safer, more sustainable path of growth? We have all positive signals in our business right now, but you don't know. You don't know. So that's Jesse's job. That's what he's swimming in every day. And I'm like, please don't bring me into that unless we have a meeting.
Or we're doing a podcast about it.
Then you have like 15 minutes to talk about it.
Right.
And and he's an obsessive person. He does Iron Man. You understand, the obsessive.
Very detail oriented.
Yeah. So he could talk about it 24/7 and be happy. But I think it's good I think I force him to be a little bit more balanced in that way.
All right. We got to wrap this up here in a couple minutes, but I can't let you go without, I love asking elite athletes what they would tell, like what are the things that most amateurs are doing wrong? Like you're at all these races, marathons, whatever, 5Ks, and you're around a lot of people who are weekend warriors or serious amateurs, and you're like, why is that person doing that? Don't they know that they like what comes up when you think about that?
Well, being that I'm in the food business, I just had a moment like this running a Picky Bars booth at a running event in Snohomish, Washington. The things that come up to me, the things people say when they come to a nutrition booth are just, that's when it happens the most. I'm like, why do you think you cannot eat carbohydrates? Why do you think that 4 grams of sugar is too much sugar? Why are you wishing this had 0 calories in it? It's food. It shouldn't have 0. Like, just the things that people believe, like hold these deep held beliefs. They make me sad, because I know from experience, having been someone who teetered on the edge of an eating disorder early in my professional career, who was pretty obsessed with weight and calories and trying to optimize it like I did every other part. I was doing that from a performance side, but I know how much brain space it can take up. It makes you unable to really enjoy your life and be present in so many other ways. So I see that and I get sad, because I'm just like, imagine what you could do if you weren't so worried about that 4 grams of sugar that comes from, banana or whatever it is. Like, well, imagine what's possible.
Hence the I Love Carbs t-shirt.
Yes,
which I love.
in defense of carbs. I don't know. I really do struggle with that. Outside of that, there's like kind of more lighthearted things like people just hammering their easy days. I'm sure you get that one a lot. But when I go out and runs with amateur runners that are just, they only run a few times a week, but when they do, they hammer it. I'm just like, ooh.
Strava culture.
Yeah. I do love some good Strava culture on the mountain bike, though, I will confess. But yeah, you just... It's like anything that people do that makes it hard to have a sustainable, enjoyable relationship with sport is hard to see.
I think I read that, weren't you running with some Kenyans once, and you were like, they run so slow.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. They were training in Palo Alto leading into the Peyton Jordan Invitational to run 5Ks and 10Ks, and I was just like, what is happening right now? They were doing the kind of jog that you do when you're approaching a red light and you want to like time it, so that you slow way down so that you can hit the light right when it turns green.
They were like, how slow?
12 to 15 minute pace at first.
Really?
Yeah. Like I'm talking.
For how long before they ramp it up?
We were running 12-minute pace probably for a few minutes, and then sort of You just gradually cranked it down, then to 10, and then to 9. But I mean, mind you, at this time, I was running all my runs at 6:40 per mile.
Right.
6 minutes and 40 seconds. So I was like, what's happening here? I was like, tripping over my feet. And then by the end, they were running under 6-minute miles. On that particular run, they ran it like a progression. But when I later got to train with Sally Kipiego, on her easy days, she would just run easier. Like she would run probably 1.5 to 2 minutes per mile slower than I would if I went out by myself. So I started making myself go out with her the days after hard workouts because she would just kick my butt on the workout days on the track. I'm like, well, obviously running those 9-minute miles isn't hurting you at all, so I might as well do that too.
There's some kind of weird American mindset where it's like we can't give ourselves permission to do that. Like we feel like, oh, if we have this time, we have to be, performance minded about it, and that it's squandered if we go slow. Even when we know it's a recovery day.
And that goes for beyond sport, right? Just taking that
life.
15 minutes between when you got to the doctor and your doctor appointment, not feel like you need to be checking emails and answering them on your phone. What if you just sat there, looked around?
Yeah, I know. But all of man's suffering can be reduced to his inability to sit with himself alone. Pascal said that.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say as a person who... sitting still does not come naturally to me, but I have
no meditation practice for you.
I don't have one. If I was an early riser, I would have one easily. I want one, but my kids are my alarm, and it makes it tough. So I have to put it at a different time of day. It's not impossible though. I could do it.
But you live in this little blue zone, right? Like you're right on a river. The kids probably go to school like down the street, right? You walk them or ride a bike to school.
Yeah, Jude's in first grade.
It's all very contained.
Zadie's home. Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool.
So Zadie is two
Yeah,
now?
Zadie's 2.
And so how old is Jude then? 5
Jude's 6.
6.
Yeah, first grader.
Yeah.
Learning to read.
Right.
Doing all that.
Super advanced.
Yeah, it's so fun.
And all right, well, let's wrap this up. So what's next? Like, what do you like? What's top of
next?
mind?
Well, top of mind for me is really, this is my New Year's. It's not New Year's, it's fall, but I really want to write. I want to do creative work, and I want it to be a part of my daily life. I want to be the best coach that I can be. And I want to spend more mindful, present time with my family. And so I'm really trying to create 3 distinct buckets. I generally like an integrated life approach. That's what I tend to do. But I've just learned that it's really making me unable to do those things as well as
Coaching,
I can.
creativity, and family.
Yep. That's what I want to do. And so creativity is going to be mostly my book, but there's space for music in there. There's space for podcast in there. It's just like creating things, feeling like that creative part of me that exists outside of someone else's athletic success, right? Because the coaching is creative, but it really is for someone else's moments. So, as rewarding as that is, I need more than that to feel good. So, yeah, and I want to set a better example for my kids around device usage. And so that's where the boundary comes for family, that when I'm with my family, I want to be with my family. And I know Jesse and I are at a point in our relationship where I think that will go a long way for us. And for my first grader, I want him to know what we're doing when we're in the room with him. And when your face is in a phone, you could be doing anything.
Yeah. It's hard.
It's hard though. Yeah. It is, but I want to try it. I want to try it for a few months and just see what happens. And I think when I'm with Jesse and we're not on our phones, I feel special to the most important person in my life. And so I know he must feel the same way when I'm not on my phone. And I need that. I need that bolstered feeling that I matter to him, that he sees me. And with all the other things happening in our life, I need to feel that. And I want him to feel it.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautifully put. I love that. And I'm going to hold you to the book.
Okay.
I'm gonna.
You want to be an early reader?
I'd be happy to. I love doing that. Yeah, please. Any help that I can give that you're willing to receive.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. And then when you write it, you can come back and tell me about it.
Okay.
Come back on the show.
Sounds good.
All right. Work, Play, Love is the podcast. You can find Lauren. She's easy to find on the internet. Yep. Fleshman Flyer.
Fleshman Flyer on
Instagram.
Both
Instagram and Twitter.
Lauren Fleshman on Twitter.
Fleshman on Twitter. And you blog on the Wazelle site, but not on your own site.
No, I haven't blogged on my own
Yeah.
site. I want to revamp my website.
Yeah.
So, but AskLaurenFleshman.com has the archives of kind of my athletic stories and kind of some Q&A. Before we answered questions on Work, Play, Love, I answered questions on my blog.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
Cool. And give my love to Jesse.
Will do.
All right. Peace. Carbs.
Peace and carbs. Don't leave them out. They're sad.